This is Keys to the Shop, episode 356, 5 Unseen Barriers to Progress. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you the insights, inspiration, and the tools necessary to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFerio, and I am your host for the show. Thanks, everybody, so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to Keys to the Shop, just wherever you're getting your podcast right now. Hit the subscribe button. It helps the show out greatly, as does sharing these episodes. So if you would have the opportunity to say, hey, this is a cool podcast, I think you should listen to this if you run a coffee shop and want to share it with your team or with your friends and coworkers, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. Now, I want to tell you about Keys to the Shop Consulting. This is where you get to work directly with me to help you start your coffee shop off on the right foot, walking with you every step of the way in the process of building your business and setting you up for success. Or if you're an existing operator, if you already have a coffee shop, but you are trying to find clarity on a number of issues, you have some projects that you want to work through, maybe you're scaling your business or you want to have an assessment of your cafe and see how you stand right now with your operations, quality, and people. There's a lot of ways that Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you thrive in coffee. I would love to have a conversation with you. All you need to do to set up a free discovery call is email chris@keystotheshop.com. Again, that's Chris, CHRIS, @keystotheshop.com, and we can have a chat about how Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you. Again, reach out, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, one of the things that I love about the industry is that we are full of creative people trying to solve problems, and not only just solve problems, but trying to optimize existing technologies so that we can really level up our expectations of ourselves and our product. And one of the companies that has done that is Voga Coffee with their awesome ground control Cyclops brewer. This brewer is absolutely revolutionizing what we can expect from batch brew coffee. The SCA award-winning technology gives you an unprecedented amount of control over a range of flavors in your coffee that with traditional batch brewing, you just didn't have access to before. It's very consistent, very easy to teach people to use, looks amazing. And beyond batch brew coffee, it also makes tea, batched iced lattes, batched cold brew. So it's a great tool for efficiency as well as quality. So check them out over at groundcontrol.coffee to learn more. I think if you want to serve your customers the absolute best expression of your coffee, then you should be thinking about getting a ground control Cyclops brewer for your store. Again, for more information, visit them at groundcontrol.coffee. So the thing about being in coffee is that you deal with a variety of people and you get to serve them a variety of different products. Everyone has different preferences, and we today in coffee have amazing products available for people to choose from in order to satisfy their desire for our amazing coffee and help them feel good about it along the way. Of course, plant-based beverages are one of the main categories that we definitely need to focus on. So you want to make sure that what you're serving them is going to really highlight the excellence of your coffee. And that is done so well by the Pacific Barista series. This is the line of plant-based performance beverages that is designed for baristas, approved by baristas, and really performs on bar by standing up to the heat from the steaming process. Every one of their extensive lineup creates amazing texture, great for latte art, and also you have a balanced beverage in the end that focuses on the coffee. Go visit them over at pacificfoodservice.com to get samples in your store and try this for yourself. I think you're really going to be impressed. Again, if you want to serve your customers the best plant-based drinks, then I really think your coffee bar should be serving the Barista series from Pacific. Okay, everybody. Well, today we are going to be talking about 5 unseen barriers to progress in your coffee shop. Your cafe is definitely the sum of all of its parts. All of the parts of a cafe that work together in the operations, I've said this before, are kind of like the watch face and what's under the watch. The watch face is what you see when you're a customer. It's working well, you can tell what time it is, but underneath, that's where all the technology lies. That's where there's entire industries of thousands of people dedicated to making sure that it works the right way. In coffee shops, it's the same thing. A customer comes in, they get a latte, they drink their latte, they get out. it's very simple, and we know it's not that simple. There's a lot of things that go into making something successful. That's why we talk about management. We talk about things like systems, because that's what creates a consistent expectation for customers. But even if you have all of the pieces in place, sometimes it just doesn't feel like things are coming together the way they should. Like on paper, it feels as though this should work, and I'm not sure why it's not working. I've taken all the advice of all of these people. I may have hired a consultant. I might have consulted the internet, and maybe I've worked in coffee before, but there's still something not quite gelling here, and I'm frustrated because I don't know what else to do. And I'm hoping to answer that today, because the title, as it suggests, is that there are some unseen things that actually are contributing to a lack of progress in your shop. And when I say progress, it could mean just the vibe of the place where people aren't as fulfilled, or it could translate into actual sales and profit because of the overall vibe. It could mean energy, that you personally and everyone else just doesn't have any motivation or energy for the space to really put out an excellent product and an excellent effort. There's a lot of ways you can think about progress. I just like to think, it's just being better on a daily basis. But because of some of these barriers to progress, we don't see the results that we want to see. And so many people I interview and I talk to as a consultant, we talk about what their dreams are and what they want to see from their coffee shop. And of course, they want to see a profitable business, but they also want to see return on mission. So the ROM, right? There's the ROI, return on investment, and it's usually financial. Then there's the return on mission, which is whatever your values are, do you see those being fleshed out in the cafe? And this is kind of more along the lines of what I want to talk about today. If you don't see that ROM, that return on mission happening, there could be something at play here. And I do believe these also cross over into progress financially, because some of the places that you go to where people are just kind of down and out and they don't feel great and no one's really excited to work there, do you think they're as profitable as maybe the exact same business that is staffed by excited, engaged, and energized people? Probably not. They probably would do better on this latter example, right? So let's talk about this. 5 unseen barriers to progress. We're going to start with the first one, and it is perfectionism. So perfectionism is a killer in coffee bars. Where I think of perfectionism, it usually stems from the leadership, management, and owners who are just expecting so much of themselves that they project it onto other people. And there's a fear that if they allow for failures and give grace to people or charitable assumption, that they're just going to get walked all over. And I think that that is a dangerous place to be in. Now, you might be in a position where somebody has done that to you, where they've taken advantage of your positivity or your ability to give grace to them. And I might say that there's a certain amount of grace or charity that you give somebody that becomes irresponsible. And so you really have to have a balance here under the weight of somebody who is a perfectionist and kind of claims that as a badge of honor, like, I'm just a perfectionist, like you're supposed to be some kind of a saint because you claim that. I run for the hills when I say that you're a perfectionist, because that means you're unrealistic. You can say you are somebody who really loves excellence and wants to strive for integrity and excellence and being faithful stewards of what you've been given, and still allow for and give space to learning. And there is going to be a mix of high peak moments and then lower mediocrity. That the difference between places that are consistently mediocre and places that are thought of as very excellent is that the places that are consistently mediocre are barely even trying, right? They just stay there. They make a habit of that. If you are striving for excellence, that doesn't mean the same thing as perfectionism. It means that you recognize that we can overcome our tendency to settle and create a culture where it's normal for us to do better work than we would if we weren't trying. So we're always trying to do great work, but we recognize that when we fail, we trust the heart of the individual is not trying to fail. They're not trying to be mediocre. They are just human. Everybody knows that you're not perfect as a boss. When you pretend that you are, when you hide your flaws, then you're basically telling them to do the same. And I've never met a manager or a boss who appreciates it when a barista tries to hide problems from them. If that's not what you want from your staff, then why would you do that yourself? It's definitely this mimetic thing where people will mimic your behavior. And then all of a sudden, we don't understand why people are not engaged. People are so stressed out and they end up making more mistakes because of this added unnecessary stress. And this is why it's unseen, because we are not self-aware. We are not aware that we have this overbearing expectation that we're projecting onto our staff. I'd rather see a coffee shop run by a group of people who accept their flaws and work to gain higher degrees of imperfection than pretend that they can just muster enough mental fortitude to become perfect. And then when mistakes happen, blow those mistakes out of proportion because it threatens their idea of who they are. It's all based on insecurity. It's very fragile. It's not resilient. So when you exchange perfectionism for just higher degrees of imperfection and a more humane approach to collective pursuit of excellence, you become anti-fragile. You become happier. You become more likely to succeed. And that really clears the air. It gives people room to breathe. It helps the culture. And then you see the barrier to progress disappear. So moving on from perfectionism, let's talk about being unapproachable. Okay, so this is one that I'm very good at. Unfortunately, in part of my life, I really did have a lot of self-pity about the way I looked, because when I would just have that resting face, won't say it, but it's like my face looks very angry when I would have just a neutral face. It seemed unfair to me. It's like, that's my face. I'm sorry. I can't do anything about that. Now, stop yourself right there, Chris. Talk to myself. I talk to you too. Stop yourself right there, because you can do something about it. My friend Tom Henschel, who runs the Look and Sound of Leadership podcast, who's going to be a guest again on the show. He's been a guest maybe 2 or 3 times now, maybe 2 times. The end of his tagline for his podcast, I might not get this right, but it ends with, so that you can be perceived the way that you want to be perceived. Now that's really critical to think about. We want to be perceived a certain way, but we don't really tend to put much effort into cultivating a sense of self and a presence that brings that perception about in people. So for me, that means not furrowing my brow as much. It's hard. It's hard to do. When I'm thinking, when I'm tired, it just gets furrowed, okay? Defurrowed, if you will, Chris DeFurrow. But the point is that I can smile more. I can light my eyes up more. I can be aware, oh, by the way, you're in public, Chris. Maybe you should not look like you want to rob the store, So just think about that. And you might not have as an extreme of an example, but when you start to examine how you show up, then you're going to start to realize how you're perceived. So maybe it's not just a physical thing, though, for you. Maybe it's just the way that you speak also. Maybe you use diminutive language or dismissive language. You tend to cut people off or shoo away their concerns. And you do it, but you don't realize you're doing it. You don't understand that, you're shutting down communication, kind of like we say not to do when people are giving you feedback and you want to argue that what they just told you is wrong instead of saying, thank you for your feedback, I'm going to think about that. We just feel the need to be defensive right away. And we are so used to just acting without thinking. That means later on, we are going to remember nothing. And when people say, you're unapproachable, what do you mean? Give me an example. And maybe they're in the same boat. They can't think of an example, but oftentimes they really can because they've been thinking about it a lot and you haven't. So often it's a shock. And I say this in coffee talks that I do. I've had a manager in my office and she was just crying because I was unapproachable. And it was my own insecurity as her manager that was leading to that being unapproachable, because somewhere down deep inside of me, I was thinking, I don't want to be approached. And, I come to realize this now. I wanted to have a quick answer. I wanted to be done with it. I can tend to be kind of black and white, all or nothing as a person. And, life has a way of rounding off the edges in making nuance be a more realistic practice. I needed to come to grips with how I showed up. And if I wanted to, like I obviously wanted to, and if I wanted to show up for my staff, for my managers, I need to think about what they need from me, not just a service, but the way that I do service. So let's talk about hospitality then, right? Because service is just what you do. Hospitality is how you do it. How is that not exactly what we're talking about right now? If you're unapproachable, but you're doing all the right things, you might have that head-scratching moment we talked about early in the episode where you're like, I don't know why people are, seemingly off-put by me, or why people don't see him as engaged. Well, it could be that how you're showing up is just service mindset and not hospitality. That you're not doing things for them. You're not studying what's most effective for the individuals that you're leading. You're just doing things that you feel comfortable with because it's more like you feel comfortable doing that. Unapproachability, being unapproachable, is one of the unseen barriers that could be getting in the way between you and progress, and your coffee shop's progress and your staff's progress. So think about that and be honest with yourself and take a small step towards self-awareness and, maybe get feedback about it. The next thing we want to talk about is assumption. And you know what they say about assumption? You make assumptions. But really, assumption is a huge barrier to progress because it denies people the ability to get quality feedback and coaching from you and from others. When we assume that somebody knows how to do a job, we deny them the knowledge of how to do it. Let's say they don't know how to do it, but we assume they do. As a leader, when you make that assumption, they pick up on that and they know, oh, they must expect me to know how to do this. So now I've got to make it up. So I'm going to make it up. Okay, I'm going to do my best effort to make it up. They assume I know how to operate this cash register or how to rotate the stock here in the back office or whatever. And so I'm going to just figure it out because they've made this assumption. Well, then what happens is we are not happy with their work and they are frustrated because clearly we are putting out that vibe that we thought they should know how to do this and they didn't know how to do it. And now we have to come in and fix their problem when all along it was our problem. We should never assume that people know all of the things that we're thinking or how to do the work of your particular coffee bar. Assuming is way more insulting, I think, than telling people something in detail that they already know. The worst thing that can happen there is that individual, maybe they're sensitive and they feel like, of course I know that. But you know what? When you're working in a coffee bar and you've got people going in and out, the rotation of staff, you can't operate under that assumption. And a mature staff member would understand that. I would rather have you operate without the assumption and cover your bases and set them up for success by being clear about your expectations and details of how to do the work and all that stuff, than just make the assumption that they already know or they should know. And I hate that word should. I say it on the show all the time. People out there have said, you shouldn't should on yourself. You shouldn't should on other people either. The reason why is because you have to ask yourself the question, why should they? Have you given them every opportunity and reason to know? Most of the time, the answer is no. Most of the time, the answer is no. Oh, well, they've been a barista in the past. They should know how to make coffee, right? I mean, they did a latte art competition once. They have 6 years working the bar, but they're doing things that I don't really like on the bar, and I don't know why, and they really should know. Well, no, that's not, what's happening there is you're making the assumption and you're drawing this false equivalency between experience and specific knowledge that they need to be successful in your business. That's why we never assume. We have to remove that, and in place of it, we operate from a position of being an agent of resourcing, an agent of clarity, of support, of coaching. And then after all of that, after they're trained, after there's clear communication and resourcing, etc., now you can say they should. Why? Because you've got something to back it up, right? But there are lots of different areas where we've kind of engaged in this assumptive behavior, and it leaves this big gap in communication that the barista doesn't want to cross because it feels wrong to bring it up to their boss. They're a little scared to do it. And if you're in the assumptive mode, you're not going to bring it up because you feel like it's demeaning to do it. Like, I don't want to do that. They should know. And for me to get down there and tell them is almost like a strike against them in your mind. And all along, it could be avoided simply by removing assumption and just being sure and thorough, communicating well, and caring for people through resourcing. And that's how you replace that and get rid of that barrier to progress. Now, another one here, number 4, is no follow through. We love to come up with manuals and wordsmith emails and have meetings and do all these things. We consider ourselves orators or authors of vision, but we're really bad at following through with what we say. And if we talk about how much we care and how we're going to look into something, or we're going to, fix a problem, oftentimes it's the first shiny thing that comes along. We're just like, oh, I can't do that. I completely forgot about what I said I was going to do. I completely forgot about what we talked about, or this initiative that we're going to plan on doing. So we always talk about things, but we never actually follow it up with action. On the show, we've mentioned this regarding one-on-ones when, let's say, a staff member brings up an issue about their schedule and how, something is happening where they're being scheduled against their availability. You as a manager, oh my gosh, you are so busy, but they've communicated to you about how this is a problem for them. And you tell them, all right, I'm going to fix that. Don't worry about that. As soon as your meeting is over, you get a text from the boss. Boss says, I need you in the office. We have kind of an emergency meeting. You're like, oh, great. I'll have to push that to tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning comes, something else happens. Pretty soon, you feel like fate has dealt you an untenable position where you cannot have followed through with that. And I'm here to tell you, I've been there, and it's not true. If you say you're going to do something, first of all, you should absolutely plan on when exactly that's going to happen, and know at least your schedule well enough to know that there is some time to be able to do it, or else you shouldn't promise at all. Just say, I will look into that, and don't promise a particular resolution and a time frame. But a lot of people try to make themselves sound way more heroic by saying, I will absolutely do that tonight, and they just don't follow through. I'd rather have you be ambiguous than be specific and not follow through. Better case scenario, be specific and follow through. Build credit. We talk about this on the show in an old episode called Building Trust Credit. Little decisions, little things, follow through. We talk about this like the Dave Ramsey debt snowball. Pay off a little bit of debt, get to the next one, pay off that credit card, pay off that one, et cetera, et cetera. And it pretty much snowballs. Now think about that in the way that you operate in the cafe. If you want to follow through and be known as a person that people can count on, and you can actually trust yourself to follow through, then start with small things. promise something small. You know you can deliver, and then deliver it. Done. Job done. Do it again the next day. Keep doing that. Build up to bigger things. And pretty soon, you're going to start to see, not only do you start trusting yourself to do these things, but you also see them trusting you. That this is the type of person who we can count on. But without that, people just hear you talking, and they know that there's not going to be anything that comes of it, because there never is anything that comes of it. And I could tell you so many baristas, this is the biggest frustration they have with management, is they say they're going to do something and they just don't do it. So if you want to eliminate this roadblock, just fix that. If you do anything from this particular episode, walk away and start making progress on that. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is cliques. And this is a unseen barrier, because and it's devious, because cliques look like community, but they tend to be kind of exclusionary. Now, there's a few different kinds of cliques happening in coffee shops. Okay. One is in the different layers and strata of the organization itself. There's the roastery crew, there's the cafe crew, there's management, and they all kind of stay in the same space, right? They don't really hobnob, whatever, with other people, and they tend to have their own culture, and that's natural. But because of this siloing that's happening, there's a breakdown of communication. This is why I often ask roasters about this on the show. How do you get feedback from and communicate with and stay in touch with the front of house, the cafe? Alan Gerard of 50% Arabica has a t-shirt that says "Blame the Roaster," and lots of baristas do that. But you know that roasters do that also for baristas. Oh, these baristas, they're such a pain in the butt. Hence the shirt. But then there are people who work in management who are kind of looking over the whole company, and they're also detached in a lot of ways. They've got their own worries and concerns. And so you've got all of these cliques, these silos of people who are within their own cultures concerned with their own concerns. That's why sometimes a coffee shop feels really disjointed, because we as people tend to break off into our own groups. People who are like us, people who we like. That's what we do. And part of how we can keep things lively as owners, as managers, as leaders, is to try to push against that and create a little bit more in exchange between these naturally occurring cliques. And now, some other ways that cliques happen is with closers and openers. I always love to see a rotation of baristas doing closing and opening shifts, never having just, only these people close and only these people open. And you could probably guess why. It's because people start to break off and form basically borders of their country, and they say, you shall not pass past here, and anything that you do is automatically going to be seen in a negative light, because that's just what openers do. And that's just what closers do. Well, that's just what roasters do. And so we dismiss. There's this dismissal of anyone outside our group. And we might not have a name for our group, but we know that you're not in it. And it doesn't matter if you're young or old, whatever, we have this tendency as people. And I feel like we do ourselves a disservice that we simply allow these things to happen without creating a common unity amongst these groups that will naturally, again, they're going to naturally form. You're not going to just be BFFs with every single person that works for this company. There are going to be some people that you just don't see. And it's not because you should see them. It's just the nature of the business. But if we are constantly trying to become aware of things outside of our normal rhythms, then we are not allowing those barriers to be so fortified that we can't benefit from others outside of the front of house or the closers or the openers and things like that. All these little factions get in the way of progress. They lead oftentimes to a lot of gossip, a lot of infighting. And so I think, again, the job of leadership is to provide this common unity. You can mix it up through the schedule, but I think you can also help by creating a culture of charitable assumption in a language that is inclusive of all aspects of the business and systems that include all aspects of the business also. So there are some ideas there for cliques and how to kind of balance the scales when it comes to getting everybody on the same page and having a healthy culture in the shop. So 5 unseen barriers to progress: the perfectionism, being unapproachable, assumption, no follow-through, and cliques. Of course, there's going to be other things that we definitely are going to be able to think about as we continue to mull over, like what else could there be that we don't see that's actually in the way of progress. Like I said, I think maybe just starting with one of these things and making some definite progress on addressing it in your life, in your coffee shop's life, is a great place to start. Maybe start with a follow-through. That's a very practical thing. You said you were going to order a knockbox. After you get off of this podcast, get on your phone, order that thing, and gift wrap it and drop it off or install it or something, and make that the first step toward building that trust. It could be other areas that we talked about, but maybe that's a good one to start with. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback for me, of course, you can email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. And if you are interested in working with Keys to the Shop Consulting, these are the type of topics that we often talk about in client relationships and calls and projects, and of course, a lot more than that. And that would be interesting to talk with you, see if maybe that would be of a benefit to your company and to your career. So you can email me, chris@keystotheshop.com, and we can have a conversation about what that might look like for you. One place that really helps us remove barriers from progress by giving us resources, clarity, information, the tools to succeed is a place like Coffee Fest trade shows. For 30 years, Coffee Fest has been providing 3 times a year, and lately 4 times a year, trade shows for the industry across the country that provides you with resourcing and knowledge to thrive as a coffee shop operator and entrepreneur. At coffeefest.com, you can find out all you need to know about the upcoming shows in LA at the end of August, and then you've got Seattle in the fall. I'm going to be at all these shows. I'm at every show every year, teaching, doing latte art judging. And that's a great thing about Coffee Fest too, is there's these lectures and workshops and trainings that are either free or very accessibly priced. There's a great community that gathers at Coffee Fest every time. There's latte art competition, there's the cold brew competition, the show floor with awesome vendors. So much to love about Coffee Fest. I invite you to check them out again at coffeefest.com. And don't forget to use the code KEYS when you register yourself and your team. That'll give you 50% off your registration fee. Again, the code KEYS when you register yourself and your team at coffeefest.com. I hope to see you there. Please do say hello. Again, check them out over at coffeefest.com. And with that, that is the end of our show today, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate all of you. Don't forget to subscribe. Share this show far and wide. Thank you so much. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.